In this video, we will be going over theme, style and tone, mood, foreshadowing, and symbolism. The notes in this video should be copied into your notebook. There will be a notebook check on them. So as you watch the video, go ahead and write the notes down into your notebook. So let's start with theme. What is theme? Well, theme is the message or lesson about life or human nature that is usually learned by your protagonist or your main character in a work of literature or in your story. So there are a couple of popular examples of theme, such as friendship is more valuable than money, or be careful what you wish for. We see theme in all sorts of stories because the main character has a conflict, and through solving that conflict, they typically will learn a lesson. And whatever that lesson is that your main character learns, that is usually going to be what your theme is. Now, themes are not directly stated in the text. Oftentimes, you are going to have to make an educated guess or an inference by using context clues and just reflecting on what the character might have learned in order to figure out what the theme is. The only time a theme will be directly stated is if you are reading a fable. Now, keep in mind that a topic is not a theme. A topic is simply the subject the author is writing about, and it is usually described in one or two words. A theme would be described in a complete sentence. Some examples of topic are friendship, war, peace, and things in that regard. Now, a theme, like said before, is a life lesson that cannot be described in one or two words. It needs to be described in a complete sentence. For example, you can be reading a story about the topic war or the topic peace, but the theme would be people should seek peace, not war. So keep that in mind. A topic is not the theme. The topic is literally just the subject the author is writing about. Now, let's continue. The theme of a story is usually going to be implied, like I stated earlier. It is not going to be directly stated. So you're going to have to use your inferencing skills to determine the theme. You're going to have to look to see what did the main character learn? How did they solve their problem? Were they able to use what they learned to solve their problem? And whatever that lesson is that the main character learned, that's usually going to be the theme of your story. Again, remember, a story can have more than one theme. Usually there's going to be a very big theme, but even if there is a main theme and smaller themes, that still means that the story has more than one theme. So you need to reflect and think, okay, what were all the lessons learned in this story? And sometimes you can learn more than one lesson from a story. Okay, now let's move on. In literary text, the theme can also be called the main idea or central idea. So when you're taking the FAST assessment, you need to keep this in mind. You have to pay attention to the words in the questions. If they're asking for the main idea or the central idea, that means that they're asking for the theme of the story. Now, there are different types of themes, and the main one is a universal theme. A universal theme is a lesson that can be applied to anybody around the world, regardless of their cultural background or their geographical location. It's basically a generalization about human nature that deals with basic human concerns or basic morals. So, for example, you can have a universal theme that people should trust in themselves, or people should have confidence within themselves. So this is just a basic moral lesson that people do need to learn about themselves, to trust themselves and have confidence in their abilities. Now, an example that would not be universal would be to say that children should obey their elders. There might be cultures that say children don't need to obey their elders because that is more of a cultural lesson. Some cultures might say that children can stand up to the elders and go against them or challenge them. Now, I know that's not the case for most cultures, but that's why it's not universal, because as long as it's not the case for everyone, then it cannot be universal. Now, universal themes inspire readers to think about what is right or wrong, what is true or false, and how those ideas connect within your own life as a reader. So it's important for you to be able to identify these universal themes. Okay, now let's move on and continue to talk about theme. Let's talk about how to determine theme. So when you are trying to determine theme, the first thing you're going to do is to examine the title because sometimes it can suggest an important idea. Once you've done that and you started reading the story, you want to determine the main conflicts that the main character is facing and the lesson that they are learning from it, because that is going to lead you to what the lesson or the theme of the story is. You're also going to want to identify any important statements the narrator or main characters might make, because those important statements might lead to what the lesson is that they are learning. You want to also examine the setting, because sometimes the setting can influence the characters and affect their actions. And finally, you want to identify symbols, which can be a person, place, or thing that is representing an idea, and those symbols can be connected to the theme in some way. Okay, that's enough on theme. Let's go ahead and start talking about the author's tone and style. Now, style is how something is told rather than what is said. I can have more than one person write a paper on the same topic. The way they're going to say what they have to say is going to be very different than the information that they are talking about. For example, if I gave 3 students the same 2 articles and told them to write an argumentative essay on it where they are arguing the same side, even though the topic is the same, the argument is the same, the way that they make the argument is going to be different because each of those 3 students is going to have a different style. Now, style is shown through a variety of factors. The first way that style is shown is through a writer's tone. Now, the tone is a writer's attitude towards the subject. They can be serious towards it, sad, playful, joyful. They can mock it and make fun of it. They can be sympathetic towards it, respectful. And so it really depends on how the author views the topic. And that's going to show really what their tone is, because their perspective on the topic is going to be seen through how they feel about the topic. If they really, really care about something, they're going to be very serious about it probably, or they're going to be very genuine about whatever they're talking about. But if they don't really respect or care about what they're talking about, you might get a tone of sarcasm with some verbal irony. Now, authors can create tone using their diction, syntax, imagery, details, and figurative language. So just to go over these a little bit, diction is essentially the choice of words that the author is going to use. So the words that they're going to use to get their point across. Syntax is going to be the structure of the sentence that they are formulating, so the way that they structure their sentences. Imagery is using the 5 senses in order to paint a picture of what it is they're discussing. Details are going to be things such as facts and just basic information that's going to support what they're trying to say, what their main idea is. And of course, figurative language would be things like similes, metaphors, personification, hyperbole, allusion, symbolism, all of these things in order for them to write more descriptively and more creatively rather than more literally. Now, in order to find style, you need to be able to identify the tone. In order to identify tone, you're going to have to infer it. That means you're going to have to make an educated guess by using the descriptive words that the author is using. So you're going to look at those descriptive words and you're going to be able to make an inference on what their tone might be. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to look at the author's language. The author's language will reveal their either positive or negative thoughts, opinions, or perspectives about what it is that they are talking about. Next, you're going to look at their diction, which is also their word choice. So this is quite literally the words that the author is choosing to use to impact you as the reader. So again, this is called diction. And so in order to figure out the style, you have to look at the words that they are using to get their point across. Now, again, word choice is tied hand in hand with tone because those words are communicating not just their ideas they're trying to get across, but their feelings. Next, you want to look at sentence structure. So these are the types and patterns and lengths of sentences used, including fragments. And so this is known as syntax. So this sentence structure is going to affect the style of the author. You might have an author that writes in a lot of short sentences, and then you might have an author who writes in very long, complicated, elaborate sentences. Again, their style is going to be different. You want to look at the dialogue. So the dialogue is going to be the realistic conversation between characters. Different authors have different types of dialogue with characters. Some might be, where it's going to actually sound like that character's dialect. And they're going to write words in very special, specific ways that's going to make it so that, instead of them saying, hey, aren't you going to the store? They're saying, hey, ain't you going to the store? So then that way you can get that dialect out. Okay, and then finally, you want to look at their imagery. So imagery is known as descriptive language. And so this is when you're using words or phrases that appeal to the five senses. So these words are going to help you as the reader see or picture in your mind a more accurate and descriptive picture of what the author is describing. So you're going to focus on the sight. For example, the light glittered in her eyes. You can see that. Sounds, we heard quick, high-pitched squeals. Smell, a powdered sweetness filled the air. Taste, she felt the sweet crumbles melt on her tongue. And touch, rough, jagged stones cut into their hands. And so this imagery is going to affect the style that the author has. Okay, so let's move on to mood and foreshadowing. Mood is the overall emotion or feeling instilled in you as the reader, which is created by the author's language, tone, and subject matter. Now, in order to figure out what the mood is, you need to ask yourself, how does this story make me feel? So do I feel calm while reading it? Do I feel fear? Do I feel anger? Do I feel stress? Or do I feel joy, etc., etc.? However you feel, that is going to be the mood of the story. You also want to look at different adjectives because the adjectives that they are using to describe the different characters in the story are going to also give you a hint as to what the mood of the story is. Now let's talk about foreshadowing. Now, foreshadowing is when a writer provides hints that suggest future events in a story. Now, writers usually use foreshadowing to build suspense and propel the action by making you as a reader eager to find out what is going to happen next. Now, in order to figure out when the author is using foreshadowing, you're going to be looking for different clues of future events that are probably going to appear in various ways, such as through dialogue, when characters are talking to each other, descriptions of events, or again, through imagery with the five senses. Here are a couple of examples of foreshadowing from the story The Monkey's Paw, which we will be reading. So here's an example of what foreshadowing looks in dialogue. So the character says, I did have some idea of selling it, referring to the monkey's paw, but I don't think I will. It has caused enough mischief already. So this foreshadows that obviously something has already happened with the monkey's paw, and you can assume that when the monkey's paw is used again, more mischief is going to happen. Now, foreshadowing can also be shown through an event. For example, he took the paw and dangled it between his forefinger and thumb. Suddenly, he threw it upon the fire. So clearly, this monkey's paw is not a good thing because he's trying to destroy it. And so through this event, we can infer that something bad will happen later on. So this is foreshadowing that something bad is going to happen later in the story. And finally, they can do this through imagery. So he sat at the dying fire, seeing faces in it. The last face was so horrible that he gazed at it in amazement. It got so vivid that with a little uneasy laugh, he felt on the table for a glass containing a little water to throw over it. His hand grasped the monkey's paw, and with a little shiver, he wiped his hands in his coat and went up to bed. So we're getting to see the dying fire. We're seeing the faces in it. Okay, and so because of that, that is foreshadowing through imagery. So obviously he can see that something bad is going to happen when he uses the monkey's paw. Okay, now let's move on to symbolism. Now, symbolism is an object that the author uses to add some sort of deeper meaning to the story by having that object represent an idea. So some popular examples of symbols are our Statue of Liberty. It symbolizes freedom. A child in a story might symbolize innocence. And a road in a story or poem might symbolize a journey or someone going on a different direction in life. Now, there are two different types of symbols. There's unique symbols and universal symbols. A universal symbol is a symbol that communicates meaning with a vast majority of people. So a large group of people will be able to understand this type of symbol regardless of where they're from. So for example, you can go to almost anyone and say, well, what does a dove symbolize? And they're going to know that it symbolizes peace. You know, across the world, if you give someone a red rose, you know that that symbolizes love. A cross might symbolize faith, okay? Now, stories can have unique symbols. Unique symbols are symbols that are not instantly recognizable to everyone because it's unique to a specific work of literature. Okay, and so, for example, we just finished reading The Lottery. So, in the book The Lottery, the black box symbolized tradition, and it was clearly an illogical dedication that the villagers have with keeping their outdated tradition of, performing the lottery every single year. So this would be a unique symbol, is the black box. Okay, now let's move on to colors in symbolism. Authors will usually use color symbolism to create something more memorable for readers by attaching an emotional state or event or even a character to a color. So each color is going to symbolize different things, okay? So red could symbolize excitement, energy, passion. It could also symbolize love or aggression, war, violence. There's plenty of things that red is associated with. Yellow is associated with joy and happiness. Blue is usually peace, tranquility, harmony, unity, truth, cleanliness. It can also be associated with some negative things like depression. Orange is symbolizing energy or balance. Green symbolizes nature usually, or the environment, or good luck. Sometimes it can also be negative and symbolize envy or misfortune. Purple is associated with royalty or spirituality or nobility. Gray is usually security, reliability, or maturity. Brown is usually having to do with the earth or home or the outdoors. White usually has to do with purity or simplicity or cleanliness, peace. It's usually a good thing. Now, in Eastern cultures, white is symbolized with death, which is the opposite of in Western cultures where black would be symbolized with death. Black also can symbolize power or evil. And so there's a lot of different things that these colors symbolize. Pink is not used often, but it can symbolize friendship or romance or positivity. Okay, and finally, when it comes to interpreting these symbols, you need to look for objects, places, people, activities that are described in great detail. And so you're going to ask yourself, how does the symbol relate to what's happening in the story, and what is it significant? What does the symbol mean to the character, and what might this symbol represent? And so when you come across a symbol, you need to ask yourself these questions, and that will help you to identify whether or not it is actually a symbol and whether it is important to the story. Okay, hopefully now you understand symbolism, tone, style, mood, foreshadowing, and theme, and you can better understand it in literature.